The Galactic Concordance had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across 1,000,000 worlds. Their ships numbered in the billions. They had conquered 847 species, and not one had ever escaped their grasp. The Concordance believed they were the masters of the universe, and for 12,000 years nothing had proven them wrong. High Archon stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. He was old by any standard, having lived for 600 years through technology that kept his body young while his mind grew sharp and cold. He had personally overseen the conquest of 93 worlds. He had watched species beg for mercy. He had watched them burn when mercy was. None of it moved him anymore. Conquest was simply what the Concordance did. It was as natural as breathing. Today, he had come to conquer Earth. The humans were a young species. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel 30 years ago. Their entire fleet consisted of 12 small frigates and a handful of research vessels. Had brought 500 dreadnoughts to this system, not because he needed them, but because protocol demanded a show of overwhelming force. In truth, a single Concordance cruiser could have crushed humanity's entire military in an afternoon. Looked at the blue and green world on his. It was pretty, he admitted. The humans had not yet polluted it beyond recognition. Perhaps he would keep it as a garden world after the conquest, a place for Concordance nobles to vacation. Open a channel to the planet, he commanded. Broadcast the terms of surrender. His communications officer obeyed. The message went out across all frequencies, translated into every human language. The terms were simple. Humanity would submit to Concordance rule. They would provide workers for Concordance projects. They would give up their weapons, their ships, and their right to self-governance. In exchange, they would be allowed to live. Most species accepted these terms. The ones who didn't were made into examples. Waited for the response. He expected panic. He expected desperate pleas. He expected the humans to realize how utterly hopeless their situation was. What he got was silence. No response, High Archon, his communications officer reported. Frowned. This was unusual. Even the most stubborn species usually responded with something, even if it was just defiant cursing. But the humans simply ignored him, as if his 500 dreadnoughts were not worth acknowledging. Scan the system, he ordered. Find their fleet. The sensor officer worked at his console. Their fleet is holding position near their moon, High Archon, 12 frigates and 8 support vessels. They are not moving. 20 ships against 500, almost laughed. They cannot possibly think they can fight us. Perhaps they are simply too afraid to run, his second-in-command suggested. That made sense. Fear could freeze prey just as easily as it could make them flee. Decided to be merciful. He would give them one more chance to surrender before he began the bombardment. Open a channel to their fleet commander, he said. I will speak to them directly. The channel opened. On his screen appeared a human female in a military uniform. She was middle-aged by human standards, with short dark hair and calm eyes. She did not look afraid. She did not look desperate. She looked at him the way one might look at an insect buzzing near their face. I am High Archon of the Galactic Concordance, he announced. You will surrender your world immediately or face total destruction. The human woman studied him for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was steady. High Archon, my name is Admiral Wei. I have a question for you. Blinked, no one questioned him. No one. You are in no position to ask questions, human. And yet I will ask anyway. Admiral leaned forward slightly. Do you believe in ghosts? Before could respond to this strange question. Every alarm on his ship began to scream. His sensor officer went pale. High Archon, we have a contact. It just appeared directly in the center of our formation. Appeared, turned to his tactical display. Ships do not just appear. They jump, they emerge from subspace. They do not simply appear. This one did, High Archon. It is not matching any known drive signature. It is not matching any known technology. It is not matching anything in our database at all. Stared at the display. There in the heart of his mighty fleet sat a single ship. It was smaller than his dreadnoughts, perhaps the size of a heavy cruiser. Its hull was dark and sleek, covered in angles that seemed to shift when he looked at them directly. It should have been insignificant. It should have been nothing. Every instinct he had developed over 6 centuries of war was screaming at him to run. "What is that thing?" he whispered. His sensor officer was shaking now. "The readings make no sense, High Archon. The ship appears to exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Its power output exceeds our entire fleet combined. Its hull is made of materials that should not be able to exist in normal space." "That is impossible." "Yes, High Archon, it is impossible, and yet it is there." On the Admiral Way smiled. It was not a kind smile. "You asked if I believe in ghosts, High Archon. Let me show you one." The impossible ship fired. There was no beam, there was no missile, there was no flash of light or pulse of energy. One moment a Concordance dreadnought existed. The next moment it did not. It had not exploded. It had not been vaporized. It had simply stopped existing, as if the universe had decided it had never been there at all. 2 more dreadnoughts vanished in the same instant. His fleet erupted in chaos. Ships fired wildly at the dark vessel, but their weapons hit nothing. The ship was there, and then it was somewhere else, and then it was there again, and nothing the Concordance did could touch it. It was not dodging. It was not blocking. It was simply not in the places they were shooting at, even though they could clearly see it. More ships vanished. 10, 20, 50. "High Archon, what do we do?" his second-in-command screamed. Watched his mighty fleet crumble before a single ship that should not exist. He watched 600 years of certainty collapse into pure, primal terror. For the first time in his long life, he gave an order that no Concordance commander had ever given. "Retreat," he whispered. Then louder, "All ships, retreat. Get us out of this system now." As his fleet fled in disgrace, Admiral's voice came over the channel one last time. "Run home, High Archon. Tell your masters what you saw today. Tell them that humanity sends its regards from the future." The went dark, and was left alone with his fear and a single burning question. What had humanity become? Admiral Way stood alone in her quarters aboard the Prometheus, staring at a small data chip that had changed the course of human history. The chip was 3 years old now, but she still remembered the day it arrived as if it were yesterday. She had been a captain back then, commanding a simple patrol frigate near Jupiter. Life had been quiet. Humanity had spread to a few colonies in the solar system, sent a handful of ships to nearby stars, and generally minded its own business. They knew the galaxy was full of other species. They knew some of those species had empires that spanned thousands of light years. They knew that someday those empires might notice humanity. They had hoped that day would come later, when they were ready. The Prometheus had appeared on a Tuesday. Remembered getting the call from Earth Command. Something had materialized in the most secure orbital shipyard humanity possessed. Not jumped in, not docked, not arrived through any normal means. One moment the shipyard had been empty. The next moment there was a warship sitting in the construction bay as if it had always been there. The ship was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Its hull was made of something that absorbed light and radar, and every other form of detection humanity knew. Its engines ran on principles that made physicists weep with confusion. Its weapons were things that humanity would not understand for another century, maybe longer. And sitting in the captain's chair was a single data chip. Had been part of the team that studied the chip. It had taken 6 months just to figure out how to read it. When they finally did, they found 3 things. The first was technical specifications for the ship. Most of it was beyond human understanding, but there was enough that made sense to let them operate the basic systems. The rest, the chip explained, would become clear with time and study. The second was a tactical database. It contained information about thousands of alien species, their ships, their weapons, their weaknesses. The Galactic Concordance was listed in detail. So were dozens of other threats that humanity had never heard of. The database was written as if the author expected humanity to need this information very soon. The third was a message. Pulled the message up on her personal screen now, reading it for what must have been the 1000th time. We send ourselves backward so that forward may exist. Strike true, strike unseen, save them all. The message was signed with her name, Admiral Way. The date was 127 years in the future. For 3 years had tried to understand what this meant. A ship from the future, a warning from the future. Her own signature on a message she had not yet written and would not write for over a century. The scientists had theories. The best one suggested that in some other timeline humanity had faced a terrible threat. They had lost, but before they lost completely, they had found a way to send something back through time. Not a message, not a warning, a weapon. The Prometheus was that weapon. It was a paradox made of metal and fire, a ship that existed because a future version of itself had decided it needed to exist. It broke every law of physics humanity knew. It broke laws of physics humanity did not yet know existed, and somehow was supposed to command it. She walked to the bridge, nodding to the crew members she passed. They were the best humanity had to offer. Scientists, soldiers, engineers, pilots, all of them had volunteered for this mission knowing they were stepping into the unknown. All of them had trained for 3 years on systems that understanding. The Prometheus did not fly like a normal ship. It did not jump through hyperspace or warp space around it. Instead, it convinced the universe that it had always been wherever it needed to be. Moving the ship felt less like piloting and more like persuading reality to see things differently. The weapons were stranger still. They did not destroy things. They removed things from probability. When the Prometheus fired on those Concordance dreadnoughts, it had not blown them up. It had simply made it so they had never existed in the first place. The crews aboard those ships had not died. They had never been born. The materials used to build those ships had never been mined. The universe had simply adjusted itself to a reality where those ships were not there. Still had nightmares about it. She took her seat in the captain's chair. Her first officer, a man named James, turned to face her. "The Concordance fleet has retreated to the edge of the system," he reported. "They are holding position but not advancing." "They are scared," said. "Good, fear might keep them cautious." For how long? That was the question, was it not? The Concordance had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had conquered almost 900 species. They did not become that powerful by running from single ships, no matter how strange those ships might be. Sooner or later they would come back, and when they did, they would bring everything they had. The Prometheus was powerful beyond anything humanity had ever possessed, but it was still just one ship. It could not fight an entire galactic empire alone. Pulled up the tactical database from the data chip. The entry on the Concordance was extensive. It detailed their military strength, their political structure, their history of conquest. But one section caught her attention now, as it had caught her attention many times before. The entry mentioned something called the Devourers. According to the database, the Devourers were a threat that would emerge 17 years from now. They were not a species in any normal sense. They were something else entirely, something that came from the darkness between galaxies. They fed on consciousness, on thought, on the very essence of sentient life. In the timeline that had sent the Prometheus back, the Devourers had come. The Concordance had fallen. Humanity had fallen. Every species in the galaxy had fallen. The Devourers had consumed everything, leaving nothing behind but empty worlds and silent stars. The Prometheus had been built by the survivors. The last humans, hiding in the ruins of a dead galaxy, had poured everything they had into one final desperate act. They could not save themselves, but they could save the past. Understood now why the message said, "Save them all." This was not just about humanity. This was about every living thing in the galaxy. The Concordants, for all their cruelty, were still alive. They still thought and dreamed and loved in their own cold way. The Devourers would take that from them just as surely as they would take it from humanity. The only way to stop the Devourers was to unite the galaxy against them. And the only way to unite the galaxy was to show the Concordants that humanity was not their enemy. Opened a communication channel. Her message would be broadcast across the system, reaching the Concordance fleet at the edge of human space. "High Archon," she said, "I have a message from the future. In 17 years, something is coming that will destroy us all. I am offering you a choice. Become our ally and help us face this threat together, or remain our enemy and watch everything you have built burn." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I will meet you alone to discuss terms. Choose wisely." She closed the channel and sat back in her chair. James was staring at her. "Do you think he will accept?" he asked. Looked at the stars on her. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between galaxies, something terrible was waiting, and humanity's only hope was convincing their worst enemy to become their greatest friend. "I do not know," she admitted, "but we have to try. The future is counting on us." High Archon had not slept in 3 days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his ships vanishing. He saw the dark hull of that impossible vessel. He heard Admiral's calm voice asking if he believed in ghosts. He had sent his report to the Concordance High Council. He had told them everything. He had expected them to mock him, to call him a coward, to strip him of his rank for retreating from a single enemy ship. Instead, they had listened in silence. Then they had ordered him to remain in the system and observe. They would send reinforcements. They would send scientists. They would find out what this human weapon was and how to destroy it. Had been a soldier his entire life. He had faced enemies that could destroy planets. He had fought in battles where billions died. None of that had prepared him for what he had seen 3 days ago. The human ship did not just his fleet. It fought on a level he could not even comprehend. Its weapons did not destroy things. They erased things, made them never exist. His sensors insisted the ship was in 17 dimensions at once. His physicists claimed that was impossible. His dead crews would have disagreed if they still existed to disagree. When Admiral's message arrived, offering a meeting, his first instinct was to refuse. It was clearly a trap. The humans wanted to lure him somewhere alone and destroy him. That was what he would do in their position. But something made him hesitate. "She said something is coming," he murmured to himself. "Something that will destroy us all." His second-in-command, a young officer named Os, stood nearby. "You cannot possibly believe her, High Archon. This is obviously a trick." Perhaps, stared at where the Prometheus sat motionless near Earth. "But consider this. The humans had this weapon. They could have used it to destroy us completely. Instead, they let us retreat. They let us live. Why?" Os had no answer. "If I wanted to trick an enemy into peace talks," continued, "I would destroy most of their fleet first. I would show them my power was absolute. I would make surrender the only logical choice. But the humans did not do that. They hurt us just enough to make us afraid, then stopped." "What are you saying, High Archon?" Turned to face his officer. "I am saying that perhaps the human admiral is telling the truth. Perhaps she really does have a warning from the future, and perhaps that warning is more important than our conflict." He made his decision. "Prepare my shuttle. I will meet with the human alone." Os protested. The bridge crew protested. Everyone aboard the Eternal Dominion protested. But was High Archon. His word was law. And so, 6 hours later, he found himself flying a small shuttle toward a dead moon that orbited a gas giant at the edge of the human solar system. Admiral was already there when he arrived. She stood alone on the surface of the moon, wearing a simple environmental suit. No guards, no weapons that he could see. She watched his shuttle land with the same calm expression she had worn during their first communication. Stepped out to meet her. The surface of the moon was gray and barren. No atmosphere, no life, just rocks and dust and the distant glow of the gas giant above. "Thank you for coming," said through their shared communication channel. "Thank you for not killing me," replied, "yet." Almost smiled. "If I wanted you dead, High Archon, you would already be gone. You saw what my ship can do." "I did, that is why I am here. I want to understand." "Then let me explain." She began to talk and listened. She told him about the Prometheus appearing in their shipyard. She told him about the data chip and the message signed with her own name from over a century in the future. She told him about the tactical database, with its detailed information about species humanity had never met. Then she told him about the Devourers. Felt his blood run cold as she described them. Entities that came from the void between galaxies. Creatures that fed on consciousness itself. Not invaders seeking territory or resources, but something far worse. Something that consumed the very essence of what it meant to be alive. In the original timeline, said, your concordance was the first to fall. You were the largest empire. You had the most minds. The Devourers struck you first and hardest. By the time the rest of the galaxy realized what was happening, it was too late. And humanity asked. We were slaves of the concordance in that timeline. You conquered Earth. You scattered our people across your empire, but when the Devourers came, we fought. We were stubborn. We were too stupid to know when to surrender. Paused. In the end, a handful of humans were the only living things left in the galaxy, and they used the last of their strength to send this ship backward through time. Was silent for a long moment. Why should I believe any of this? Because your scientists can confirm it, said. The Prometheus exists in 17 dimensions. Your best minds will tell you that is impossible. They will tell you that no technology in the known galaxy could create such a thing. And they will be right. The technology does not exist yet. It comes from a future where humanity spent a century learning from our mistakes and our suffering. She stepped closer to him. I am not asking you to trust me, High Archon. I am asking you to study the evidence. Look at my ship. Look at the readings your sensors collected. Ask yourself how any of this is possible. And when you cannot find an answer, ask yourself if perhaps the impossible answer is the true one. Looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between galaxies, something terrible was waiting. He had ruled the stars for 6 centuries. He had believed the concordance was invincible. But now a human woman was telling him that everything he knew was about to end. And the worst part was that he believed her. What do you want from us? He asked. An alliance, said simply. The Devourers cannot be defeated by any one species, not even by your concordance, but together, united, the galaxy might have a chance. The concordance does not make alliances. We conquer, we rule, that is our way. Then your way will end in extinction. His voice was hard now. I have seen it, High Archon. I have seen the reports from a future that no longer exists. Your mighty empire, silent and dead. Your trillions of subjects, their minds consumed. Everything the concordance built over 12,000 years, erased as if it never mattered. She grabbed his arm, and he did not pull away. I am offering you a chance to change that future, a chance to survive. All you have to do is work with us instead of against us. Looked into her eyes. He saw determination there. He saw fear. But most of all, he saw truth. This woman was not lying to him. She genuinely believed what she was saying. She genuinely believed the galaxy was in danger. And after seeing what her ship could do, he was inclined to believe it too. The Council will never agree to this, he said slowly. They will see it as weakness. Then convince them, you are High Archon, you have earned the right to speak. Thought about his options. He could return to his fleet and continue the war. He could throw his entire armada at the Prometheus and hope for the best. But he had seen how that would end. His ships would vanish one by one until nothing remained. Or he could take a risk. He could believe this human. He could try to save his people, even if it meant changing everything they had ever been. He extended his hand. It was a human gesture, one he had learned centuries ago. He had never thought he would use it. I will speak to the council, he said. I will tell them what you have told me, and I will argue for this alliance. Took his hand, her grip was firm. That is all I ask. One question, said, the future version of you that sent this ship back, what happened to her? His expression grew sad. She died the moment the ship translated backward. The timeline she existed in collapsed. She erased herself so that we could have a chance. Released her hand. He looked at this human woman who carried the weight of a dead future on her shoulders. He had conquered 93 worlds. He had watched species burn. He had never felt respect for any of them. He felt it now. She must have been remarkable, he said quietly. She was me, replied, and I am trying to become worthy of her sacrifice. She turned and walked back toward her shuttle, watched her go, then returned to his own ship. He had a council to convince and a galaxy to save. For the first time in 600 years, he had hope. The years passed faster than anyone expected. Admiral Wei stood in the command center of Unity Station, a massive structure that had not existed 5 years ago. It orbited a neutral star, far from both Earth and the Concordance. Humans and Concordance officers worked side by side at their stations, sharing technology and knowledge that would have been unthinkable a decade earlier. The alliance had not been easy to build. High Archon had kept his word. He had returned to the Concordance Council and argued for peace with humanity. The Council had laughed at him. They had called him a coward and a fool. Some had demanded his execution for the shame he had brought upon the Empire. Then had shown them the sensor readings from the battle. He had shown them the Prometheus appearing from nowhere, existing in 17 dimensions, erasing ships from probability itself. He had shown them the tactical database from the future, with its detailed information about threats the Concordance had never encountered. And finally, he had shown them the entry on the Devourers. The laughter stopped. The calls for execution stopped. The council sat in silence as they read about the entities that had consumed their entire empire in another timeline. They watched simulations based on the future data, showing their mighty fleets falling one by one to an enemy that fed on their very thoughts. The vote for alliance passed by a narrow margin, not because the council liked humans, not because they respected them, but because they feared the alternative more. That had been 12 years ago. Now, as looked around Unity Station, she saw the fruits of that fear. Concordance engineers had shared their secrets of energy manipulation. Human scientists had shared their advances in theoretical physics. Together, they had built weapons that neither species could have created alone. The Prometheus was no longer the only ship of its kind. A fleet of 300 vessels now patrolled the galaxy, each one carrying technology from the future and improvements from the present. They were not as powerful as the original Prometheus, but they were powerful enough. The galaxy had never seen anything like them. And it was not just the Concordance and humanity working together. Word of the alliance had spread across the stars. Other species, long conquered by the Concordance, had watched with amazement as their masters suddenly sought allies instead of subjects. Some had joined the alliance willingly, eager to contribute to their own survival. Others had joined reluctantly, pushed by the same fear that had convinced the Concordance Council. In 12 years, the alliance had grown to include 47 species. Walked through the station. passing Concordance officers in their crystalline armor and human technicians in their plain uniforms. She saw members of a species of aquatic beings who communicated through color-changing skin. She saw the mechanical forms of the Axiom Collective, artificial intelligences who had earned their freedom through cooperation. She saw the tall, thin bodies of the Whisper kind, beings who existed partially in dimensions most species could not perceive. All of them were here because of the Prometheus. All of them were here because a ship from the future had convinced the galaxy that working together was the only way to survive. Entered a private meeting room where was waiting. The High Archon looked older now. Not physically, since Concordance technology kept his body young, but there was a weariness in his eyes that had not been there before. 12 years of building something new had taken its toll on both of them. "The latest reports are concerning," said without greeting. "Our deep space sensors are detecting anomalies at the edge of the galaxy." Sat down across from him. "What kind of anomalies?" "The kind that match the descriptions in your tactical database. Cold spots in space where thought itself seems to fade. Ships that enter those regions report feeling watched." His heart sank. "How long do we have?" Based on the original timeline, the Devourers arrived 17 years after the Concordance first attempted to conquer Earth. We are now in year 15. Paused. "We have perhaps 2 years, perhaps less." 2 years. They had built so much in 12 years. An alliance of 47 species. A fleet of 300 advanced warships. Defensive networks spanning 1,000 worlds. But would it be enough? Pulled up the tactical display. The galaxy spread out before them, a spiral of stars and civilizations. 47 species, united against a threat most of them had never seen. Trillions of lives depending on the choices made in this room. "Show me the anomalies," she said. Adjusted the display. Red markers appeared at the edge of the galaxy, scattered along the outer rim. Cold spots, dead zones, places where the Devourers were already beginning to reach through from the void. "We have been sending probes into these regions," said. "Most do not return. The ones that do bring back sensor data that makes no sense. Readings that suggest the presence of something that exists outside normal space. Something hungry." Studied the markers. In the original timeline, the Devourers had struck without warning. The galaxy had been caught unprepared, divided, fighting among itself. This time would be different. This time they would be ready. "Call the War Council," she ordered. "Every species, every leader. We need to finalize our defensive plans." Nodded, and the Prometheus looked out the window at her ship. The original vessel, the one that had appeared from nowhere 15 years ago. It still sat at the heart of the Alliance fleet, a symbol of hope and defiance. Her crew had aged alongside her. Some had married, had children, built lives in a galaxy they were fighting to save. All of them knew they might not survive what was coming. "The Prometheus will lead the defense," said. "It was sent back to save the galaxy. That is what we are going to do." Over the following months, the Alliance prepared for war. Fleets moved into position around the anomaly zones. Defensive platforms were activated in every inhabited system. Evacuation plans were put in place for species who could not fight. Spent her days in meetings and her nights staring at the stars, wondering if she was doing enough. The weight of the future pressed down on her constantly. Somewhere out there, in a timeline that no longer existed, another version of herself had sacrificed everything to send the Prometheus back. Had given up her life, her future, her very existence so that this moment could be possible. Was determined not to waste that sacrifice. She received a message one evening from an unexpected source. It was from her daughter. Sarah was 20 years old now, born just after the Alliance was formed. She had grown up on Unity Station, surrounded by species her mother had never imagined meeting. She had learned to speak 3 alien languages before she learned to ride a bicycle. She had friends among the Concordance, the Axiom Collective. She was the future the Alliance was fighting for. "Mom," Sarah's message said, "I know you are busy. I know the Devourers are coming, but I wanted you to know that I am proud of you. Whatever happens, you gave the galaxy a chance. That matters." Read the message 3 times before she could respond. "Thank you," she wrote back. "Stay safe, I love you." She sent the message and turned back to her work. There was still so much to do: defense grids to coordinate, fleet movements to approve, strategies to review. But for a moment, she allowed herself to smile. The future she was fighting for had just reminded her why the fight was worth it. The Devourers were coming. The galaxy was as prepared as it could be. And Admiral Wei, commander of a ship that should not exist, was ready to face whatever emerged from the darkness. She only hoped it would be enough. The Devourers arrived on a Tuesday. Remembered thinking how ordinary the day had been before the alarm started. She had eaten breakfast in her quarters. She had reviewed fleet reports. She had sent a message to Sarah wishing her a happy birthday. 22 years old. Her daughter was 22, and the galaxy was about to end. Then the sensors screamed. The anomalies at the edge of the galaxy had been growing for months. Now they tore open completely. Reality itself seemed to bleed as the Devourers emerged from the void between galaxies. They were not ships. They were not creatures. They were absence given form, hunger given will. Stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and watched them come. "All fleet commanders report status," she ordered. The responses came in from across the galaxy. 300 advanced warships, crewed by 47 species, all of them ready to fight, commanded the Concordance contingent from his flagship. The Admiral spoke through translated colors. The Axiom Collective hummed with digital determination. It was the largest military force the galaxy had ever assembled. Prayed it would be enough. The Devourers moved like shadows spreading across water. They did not fly through space so much as expand into it, filling every corner they touched with their hungry presence. Wherever they went, thought faded. Consciousness dimmed. Minds simply stopped, consumed by an appetite older than the galaxy itself. "All ships engage," commanded. The battle began. Weapons that had taken 15 years to develop fired across the void. Probability cannons from the Prometheus and its sister ships erased swaths of Devourer presence. Energy beams from Concordance dreadnoughts burned through the darkness. Missiles carrying payloads designed by 47 species working together exploded in cascades of light. The Devourers reeled. For the first time in their eternal existence, they encountered prey that fought back effectively. They had expected easy hunting, minds scattered and divided as they had always been. Instead, they found a galaxy united against them. But the Devourers were patient, they were vast, and they were hungry. For every shadow destroyed, 2 more emerged from the tears in reality. They learned from the attacks against them, adapting their forms to resist the weapons being used. They pushed deeper into the galaxy, reaching for the populated systems where trillions of minds waited to be consumed. The battle spread across 1,000 light-years. Ships fell on both sides. Entire star systems became. The galaxy burned with the light of weapons that could reshape reality itself. Fought from the heart of the chaos. The Prometheus danced through 17 dimensions, striking the Devourers in ways they could not predict or defend against. She watched her crew perform miracles of courage and skill. She watched some of them die when the Devourers found ways to touch their ship despite its dimensional shields. After 7 days of continuous fighting, the Alliance was losing. "We cannot sustain this," reported, his face haggard on her. "Our losses exceed 40%. The Devourers are reaching the inner systems." Looked at the tactical display. Red markers everywhere, showing Devourer incursions spreading like a disease. Blue markers showing Alliance forces growing fewer by the hour. In the original timeline, this was where everything ended. The Devourers swept through the galaxy, consuming every mind they encountered. The Concordance fell. Humanity fell. Everyone fell, until only a handful of survivors remained, building one last desperate weapon. Refuse to let that happen again. All ships fall back to secondary defensive lines, she ordered. Protect the core systems at all costs. The fleet retreated, giving ground slowly while making the Devourers pay for every light year. Watched the tactical display as her forces consolidated around the most populated regions of the galaxy. If they could not stop the Devourers everywhere, they would stop them here. They would make this the line that could not be crossed. The Devourers gathered at the edge of the defensive perimeter like a tide preparing to crash against a shore. There were more of them now, drawn by the feast of consciousness that waited just beyond the Alliance fleet. Millions of shadows hungry for billions of minds. Knew what she had to do. All senior officers, I need a channel to every ship in the fleet. Her communications officer's face appeared on screens across 1,000 vessels, seen by millions of crew members from dozens of species. I will not lie to you, she said. The situation is desperate. We have lost good people, good ships. The Devourers are stronger than we hoped. She paused, looking into the camera as if she could see every face watching her. But we are still here, all of us, united, fighting. The timeline that created this ship that created me ended with the galaxy consumed and dead. But that timeline changed when the Prometheus came back. It changed because one version of humanity refused to give up, even at the very end. She stood. Now it is our turn to refuse. Not just humanity, but all of us. Concordance and human, an axiom. Every species that chose to stand together against the darkness. We fight not just for ourselves, but for everyone who ever looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. She raised her hand. I am ordering a final offensive. Every ship, every weapon, everything we have. We will show the Devourers what a united galaxy can do. We will show them that consciousness is not just prey. It is fire. It is defiance. It is the refusal to go quietly into the dark. Her hand dropped. All ships attack. The Alliance fleet surged forward. What followed was the largest battle in galactic history. 300 warships threw themselves against the Devourer host. Weapons fire lit up entire star systems. Reality itself bent and warped as the Prometheus led the charge, its impossible technology striking at the heart of the enemy. Fought like she had never fought before. The Prometheus moved through dimensions the Devourers could not follow. It struck them from angles that should not exist. It erased their presence from probability again and again, faster than they could adapt. And slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The Alliance had learned from 15 years of preparation. Their weapons were designed specifically to fight this enemy. Their tactics were built around the weaknesses described in the future tactical database. They fought not as individuals, but as a single unified force. The Devourers began to retreat. It took another 3 days to finish them. 3 days of hunting the remnants through the edges of the galaxy. 3 days of sealing the tiers in reality they had used to enter. 3 days of making absolutely certain that none remained. When it was finally over, stood on her bridge and wept. The galaxy was saved. Battered, mourning countless dead, but saved. The Devourers were gone. The threat from the void had been turned back. The future that had sent the Prometheus backward would never come to pass. A message arrived at her console. It was addressed to her specifically, marked with encryption codes she did not recognize. The signature was dated 127 years in the future. That was impossible. They had changed the timeline. That future did not exist anymore. She opened the message with trembling hands. Thank you, we live because you remembered us. Now make a future worth living. Stared at the words for a long time. She did not understand how this message could exist. The timeline that had created the Prometheus had collapsed when the ship translated backward. The people who had sent it were gone, erased from existence by their own sacrifice. But somehow, some echo of them remained. Perhaps in the fabric of reality itself. Perhaps in the probability shadows that the Prometheus manipulated. Perhaps in some dimension beyond human understanding. They had seen their sacrifice vindicated. They had seen the galaxy survive. And they had found a way to say goodbye. Save the message. She would treasure it for the rest of her life, a gift from ghosts who had given everything so that others could live. She opened a channel to her crew. "The war is over," she said simply. "We won. Now let us go home and start building something worth protecting." The Prometheus turned toward Earth, leading a fleet of survivors through a galaxy full of stars and life and possibility. They had struck unseen. They had struck true. They had saved them all. And somewhere in the vast probability of time, the echoes of a dead future smiled and finally found peace. The end.